What if your best friend spent 12 years planning the perfect revenge against you, and you had no idea why Victoria Hayes thought she had everything? A loving husband, a beautiful home, and after years of trying, she was finally pregnant. But in one devastating moment, her perfect life began to crumble. The pregnancy test fell from her shaking hands as she overheard her husband whispering to someone on the phone, "I can't keep pretending anymore. Victoria doesn't suspect anything." The woman he was talking to, Bethany Morrison, Victoria's maid of honor, her closest friend, the person she trusted more than anyone in the world. But this wasn't just an affair. This was something far more sinister, something that had been carefully orchestrated since their college graduation, when Victoria unknowingly committed a sin that Bethany could never forgive. Now, as Victoria carries the child she's waited years for, she discovers that her best friend has been systematically destroying every aspect of her life, her marriage, her finances, even her sanity, and Bethany's final target, the innocent baby Victoria is carrying. This is the story of how a pregnant woman fought back against a master manipulator who had turned revenge into an art form. It's about the deadly game of psychological warfare that some people call friendship. And it's about discovering that sometimes the people who know us best are the ones most capable of destroying us. Stay with me for the next 90 minutes as we uncover the shocking truth about Bethany Morrison's 12-year plan for the perfect revenge. Trust me, you won't see the ending coming. Victoria Hayes stared at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands, watching as the second pink line slowly appeared. After 3 years of trying, countless doctor visits, and whispered prayers in hospital waiting rooms, she was finally pregnant. At 32, she had almost given up hope. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she clutched the test to her chest. Jonathan would be thrilled. They had talked about starting a family since their wedding day 5 years ago, planning nursery colors and discussing baby names during lazy Sunday mornings in bed. She rushed from the master bathroom toward Jonathan's home office, ready to share the news that would change their lives forever. But as she approached his door, she heard his voice, low and urgent. "Beth, you know I've always loved you," Jonathan whispered into his phone. "This situation with Victoria is getting complicated." Victoria froze in the hallway, her bare feet suddenly cold against the hardwood floor. Through the crack in the office door, she could see her husband's profile, his face soft in a way she hadn't seen in months. "I can't keep pretending anymore," Jonathan continued. "Victoria doesn't suspect anything, but I'm tired of living this lie." The pregnancy test slipped from Victoria's numb fingers, clattering against the bathroom tiles as it fell. The sound echoed through their sprawling suburban home like a gunshot. Jonathan's voice stopped mid-sentence. Victoria held her breath, pressing herself against the wall as her heart hammered against her ribs. 7 weeks pregnant, and her husband was having an affair with Bethany Morrison, the woman who had been maid of honor at their wedding, who helped them choose this very house, who Victoria called her closest friend. "I have to go," Jonathan said quickly. "Victoria's home." Victoria stumbled back to the bathroom, grabbing the pregnancy test from the floor. The second line was darker now, unmistakable. She was carrying the child of a man who was in love with someone else. Her phone buzzed with a text from Bethany. "Can't wait to see you both at dinner Friday. I have exciting news to share." Victoria's hands shook as she read the message. How long had this been going on? How many dinners had she sat through, laughing with the woman who was destroying her marriage? How many times had Bethany hugged her goodbye while secretly planning to steal her husband? She thought about all the signs she had missed. Jonathan working late more often, the way he checked his phone constantly during dinner, how he had become distant and distracted, claiming stress from his tech startup was keeping him up at night. And Bethany, sweet, caring Bethany, who had been there through Victoria's mother's cancer battle, who organized surprise parties and brought soup when Victoria had the flu, the woman who knew all of Victoria's secrets, fears, and dreams. Victoria sank onto the marble bathroom floor, still holding the pregnancy test. This should have been the happiest moment of her life. Instead, it felt like the beginning of her worst nightmare. She heard Jonathan's footsteps in the hallway. "Vic, everything okay? I thought I heard something fall." Victoria quickly wiped her tears and shoved the pregnancy test into her robe pocket. "Just dropped my phone," she called back, forcing her voice to sound normal. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Nothing would ever be fine again. That evening, Victoria sat across from Jonathan at their dining room table, pushing food around her plate while her stomach churned with morning sickness and betrayal. Jonathan seemed different, guilty, nervous, avoiding her eyes. "How was work?" she asked, testing him. "Busy," he replied quickly. "You know how it is with the new product launch." Victoria nodded, though she knew his startup had been struggling for months. The exciting tech innovation that was supposed to revolutionize small business marketing had failed to gain traction. Investors were getting nervous, and Jonathan had been scrambling to keep the company afloat. "Maybe you should talk to Bethany about it," Victoria suggested, watching his reaction carefully. "She's great with business advice." Jonathan's fork clattered against his plate. "Why would you say that? She helped us with the house purchase. She's smart about investments and market trends." Victoria kept her voice casual, though her heart was racing. "I just thought she might have some ideas." "I don't need Bethany's help," Jonathan snapped, then immediately softened his tone. "Sorry, I'm just stressed about everything." Victoria studied her husband's face. He was lying about something, but she couldn't tell what. Was the affair real, or had she misunderstood the phone conversation? Was Jonathan in financial trouble beyond what he had told her after dinner? Victoria excused herself to take a bath, but instead, she sat on their bedroom floor and called Bethany. "Hey, girl!" Bethany's voice was bright and cheerful. "What's up?" "I need to ask you something," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "Are you sleeping with my husband?" The silence stretched between them for what felt like an eternity. "Victoria," Bethany finally said, her tone completely different, cold and measured. "What would make you think something like that?" "I heard him on the phone today. He said he loved you." Another pause. Then Bethany laughed, a sound Victoria had never heard from her before, bitter and sharp. "And what if he did?" Bethany asked. "What would you do about it?" Victoria's blood turned to ice. This wasn't the reaction of an innocent friend. This was the response of someone who had been caught. "Beth, please," Victoria whispered. "If something is happening between you two, we need to talk about it. I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. When Bethany finally spoke, her voice was filled with something Victoria couldn't identify. Satisfaction, perhaps, or triumph. "How convenient," Bethany said softly. "Congratulations, Victoria. I'm sure Jonathan will be thrilled to hear the news." The line went dead. Victoria stared at her phone, her hands trembling. Something was very wrong here. Bethany's reaction wasn't guilt or shame. It was something much darker. And the way she had said convenient made Victoria's skin crawl. She realized with growing horror that this affair wasn't accidental. It had been planned. But why would her best friend want to destroy her life? And what did her pregnancy have to do with it? Victoria pulled the pregnancy test from her robe pocket and stared at the two pink lines that should have represented hope and joy. Instead, they felt like a target painted on her back. She was 7 weeks pregnant, and her world was falling apart. But she had no idea that this was only the beginning of Bethany Morrison's carefully orchestrated revenge. Victoria barely slept that night, lying next to Jonathan as he tossed and turned, muttering in his sleep. She studied his face in the moonlight streaming through their bedroom windows, searching for signs of the man she had fallen in love with 8 years ago. They had met at a coffee shop near the university where Victoria was finishing her marketing degree. Jonathan had been working on his business plan for what would eventually become his tech startup. He was passionate, driven, and completely devoted to her from their first date. Now, watching him sleep, Victoria wondered if any of it had been real. Had he always been capable of this kind of betrayal, or had Bethany somehow manipulated him into it? The next morning, Jonathan left early for work, claiming an important investor meeting. Victoria waited until his car disappeared down their tree-lined street before she called in sick to her marketing job and began her investigation. She started with their joint bank account, logging into their online banking system with growing unease. Jonathan had always handled their finances, claiming he was better with numbers. Victoria had trusted him completely. What she found made her stomach drop. $50,000 had been transferred to a new account she had never heard of. The account was labeled Hayes Investment Portfolio and had been opened 3 weeks ago with Bethany Morrison listed as the financial advisor. Victoria's hands shook as she scrolled through the transaction history. There were regular transfers, investment purchases she didn't recognize, and fees for services she couldn't identify. It looked like Jonathan had been moving their money without telling her. Her phone rang, making her jump. Jonathan's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice strained. "How are you feeling? You sounded off last night." Victoria took a deep breath. "We need to talk when you get home." "About what?" "About Bethany. About the money you've been moving. About the phone call I overheard yesterday." The silence stretched between them. Victoria could hear office noise in the background, phones ringing, conversations, the normal sounds of a busy workplace. "Victoria," Jonathan said slowly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Then come home and help me understand." Jonathan arrived 2 hours later, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his shirt wrinkled. He looked like a man who had been running from something and finally gotten caught. Victoria sat in their living room, the pregnancy test on the coffee table between them like evidence in a trial. Jonathan's eyes fixed on it immediately. "You're pregnant," he said, his voice flat. 7 weeks, Victoria confirmed. "Aren't you going to say anything else?" Jonathan sank into the chair across from her, his head in his hands. "The timing is terrible." Victoria felt like she had been slapped. "Terrible, Jonathan. We've been trying for 3 years." "I know," he whispered, "but everything is so complicated right now." "Because of Bethany," Jonathan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with something that looked like panic. "What about Bethany? I heard you on the phone yesterday. You told her you loved her. You said you couldn't keep pretending with me." Jonathan's face crumpled, and suddenly he was crying. Deep, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. Victoria had never seen him break down like this. "I'm sorry," he gasped between tears. "I'm so sorry. Victoria, I never meant for this to happen." Victoria felt her heart breaking and reforming simultaneously. Part of her wanted to comfort him, to hold him and work through this together. But another part of her, growing stronger by the minute, recognized that his tears felt rehearsed. "How long?" she asked. 2 months, Jonathan admitted. "It started after your mother's funeral. Bethany was there for me when you were so deep in grief. She understood what I was going through." Victoria remembered those dark weeks after losing her mother to cancer. She had been devastated, barely able to function. Bethany had indeed been supportive, bringing meals and helping with funeral arrangements. Jonathan had seemed overwhelmed by Victoria's grief, often leaving the house for long periods to give her space. "So while I was mourning my mother, you were falling in love with my best friend." Jonathan winced. "It wasn't like that. We just talked at first. She was helping me understand how to support you. But then," he trailed off, unable to meet her eyes. "Then what?" "She made me realize how unhappy I've been, how we've grown apart, how maybe we rushed into marriage before we really knew each other." Victoria felt ice forming in her veins. These weren't Jonathan's words. She had heard this exact speech from Bethany during her divorce from her first husband 5 years ago. Bethany had used almost identical phrasing when explaining why she had to leave Tom Morrison. "Those are Bethany's words," Victoria said quietly. Jonathan's head shot up. "What?" "That entire speech. Bethany said the same things when she divorced Tom. Word for word. That's not, I mean, maybe we talked about it, but these are my feelings." Victoria stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where she had imagined their children playing someday. "Jonathan, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I think Bethany is manipulating you." "That's ridiculous." "Is it you've been moving our money into accounts she set up? You're using her words to describe your feelings about our marriage. And somehow, she convinced you to start an affair right when I was at my most vulnerable." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was defensive. "Bethany cares about me. She sees me in a way that you don't anymore." "What way is that?" "She believes in my business. She's been helping me save the company when everyone else, including you, thought it was hopeless." Victoria turned back to face him. "How exactly is she helping save your company?" "She's been advising me on investments, helping me diversify our portfolio so we're not completely dependent on the startup success. She has connections in real estate and other industries." "And how much of our money has she invested for you?" Jonathan hesitated. "About 60,000 so far." Victoria felt the room spin. "That was most of their savings. money they had been carefully accumulating for their future, for the house they wanted to buy in a better school district, for the children they planned to have. Jonathan, do you realize what you've done? You've given our entire financial future to the woman you're having an affair with. It's not like that. These are legitimate investments. Show me the paperwork. I don't have it with me. Then call Bethany and ask her to bring it over. Jonathan's face went pale. She's out of town this week. Real estate conference. Victoria pulled out her phone and called Bethany's number. It went straight to voicemail, but the message was strange. You've reached Bethany Morrison. I'm unavailable indefinitely. For urgent real estate matters, please contact Henderson Properties. Indefinitely. Victoria showed Jonathan the phone. She told you she was at a conference, but her voicemail says she's unavailable indefinitely. Jonathan stared at the phone, confusion and fear warring on his face. Maybe she changed it for the conference. Or maybe she's planning to disappear with our money. The accusation hung between them like a physical presence. Jonathan shook his head vehemently. You're being paranoid. Bethany would never steal from us. She's your best friend. My best friend wouldn't sleep with my husband either. But here we are. Jonathan flinched as if she had hit him. Victoria, please. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but Bethany isn't some criminal mastermind. She's been there for me when I needed someone. She's been there for you while I was pregnant and grieving my mother. Do you see how that sounds? I need some space to think, Jonathan said suddenly, standing up. This is all happening too fast. Space. Victoria felt panic rising in her chest. Jonathan, I'm pregnant with your child. We need to work through this together. I can't think clearly when you're accusing Bethany of being some kind of con artist. I need a few days to figure out what I want. What you want? What about what our baby needs? What about our marriage? Jonathan was already moving toward the door. I'll stay at my dad's for a few days. We can talk when things calm down. If you walk out that door, don't expect me to be here when you decide what you want. Jonathan paused with his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, Victoria thought he might turn around, might choose his wife and unborn child over whatever spell Bethany had cast over him. Instead, he said quietly, I'm sorry, Victoria. I really am. Then he was gone, leaving Victoria alone with her pregnancy test and the growing certainty that her husband's affair was just the beginning of something much more sinister. She called Bethany's number again, and this time, someone answered. Hello, Victoria. Bethany's voice was different, confident and cold in a way Victoria had never heard before. We need to talk, Victoria said. Yes, Bethany replied. I think we do. But first, let me congratulate you on your pregnancy. It must be so exciting to be starting a family, all alone. The line went dead, and Victoria realized that her best friend's mask had finally slipped completely away. Victoria's sister Grace arrived within an hour of her frantic phone call, armed with coffee, tissues, and the fierce protective instinct that had made her Victoria's champion since childhood. At 29, Grace was everything Victoria wasn't. Impulsive where Victoria was cautious, confrontational where Victoria preferred diplomacy, and completely unimpressed by people who tried to manipulate her family. Show me everything, Grace said, settling beside Victoria on the couch with her laptop. Bank statements, investment documents, anything Bethany has been involved with. If on they spent the morning combing through financial records, and what they discovered made Victoria's blood run cold. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. Bethany had been slowly inserting herself in Jonathan's business decisions for over 6 months, long before the affair supposedly began. Look at this. Grace pointed to a series of transactions. She set up this investment account in January, right after Mom's diagnosis. She's been positioning herself as Jonathan's financial advisor since before Mom even died. Victoria stared at the dates, feeling sick. She was planning this before the affair started. She used Mom's illness as an opportunity to get close to Jonathan when she knew I'd be distracted. It gets worse, Grace said grimly, scrolling through more documents. These investments she convinced Jonathan to make, they're all failing. The real estate partnership lost $15,000 last month. The tech stocks are worthless. It's like she deliberately chose bad investments. But why would she do that if she's planning a future with Jonathan? Wouldn't she want his money to grow? Grace looked at her sister with pity. Vic, honey, I don't think she wants a future with Jonathan. I think she wants to destroy you both. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. That's insane. We've been friends for 12 years. She was in our wedding. She helped us buy this house. Did she help you buy the house? Or did she handle all the paperwork while you were busy with wedding planning? Victoria tried to remember. The house purchase had been chaotic, happening just 2 months before their wedding. Bethany had offered to handle the real estate details while Victoria focused on the ceremony. It had seemed like such a thoughtful gesture from a caring friend. Oh God, Victoria whispered. She had access to all our financial information. She knew exactly how much money we had, what our credit looked like, everything. Grace pulled up the property records on her laptop. Victoria, when did you last look at the deed to this house? I don't know. Years ago. Why? Grace turned the laptop screen toward her sister. According to this, the house is only in Jonathan's name. You're not on the deed. Victoria felt the world tilt around her. That's impossible. I was at the closing. I signed papers. You might have signed mortgage applications or other documents, but the actual ownership is listed as Jonathan Hayes only. If you divorce, you have no legal claim to this house. Victoria struggled to breathe as the full scope of Bethany's manipulation became clear. Her best friend hadn't just stolen her husband. She had been systematically dismantling Victoria's financial security for years. I need to see Dr. Mitchell, Victoria said suddenly. The stress is making me feel awful, and I can't afford to lose this baby on top of everything else. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been Victoria's obstetrician since her first pregnancy attempt 3 years ago. A warm, no-nonsense woman in her 40s. She had guided Victoria through multiple disappointments with patience and expertise. Your blood pressure is elevated, Dr. Mitchell said, wrapping up the examination. And your stress levels are clearly impacting your physical health. What's going on at home? Victoria. Victoria found herself telling Dr. Mitchell everything. The affair, the financial manipulation, Jonathan's abandonment. Dr. Mitchell listened without judgment, occasionally making notes in Victoria's file. I'm going to be blunt with you, Dr. Mitchell said when Victoria finished. Extreme stress during the first trimester can lead to miscarriage, premature labor, or developmental issues. You need to find a way to minimize the chaos in your life, or you're going to lose this baby. How am I supposed to minimize chaos when my husband has disappeared with another woman and most of our money? By taking control of what you can control? Get a lawyer, document everything, build a support system that doesn't include the people who are hurting you, and consider whether trying to save your marriage is worth risking your pregnancy. That evening, Victoria and Grace sat in the living room surrounded by papers, laptops, and takeout containers, building a timeline of Bethany's manipulation. The picture that emerged was chilling in its calculation. Look at this pattern, Grace said, pointing to her notes. Every major crisis in your life, Bethany was right there offering help. When Mom got sick, she organized meal trains and drove you to appointments. When Jonathan's business started struggling, she appeared with investment advice. When you and Jonathan had that big fight about kids last year, she took you on that girls' weekend to clear your head. She was being a good friend. Was she, or was she inserting herself into every vulnerable moment so she could gather information and plant seeds of doubt? Victoria thought about that girls' weekend. They had gone to a spa resort, and Bethany had spent the entire time asking probing questions about Victoria's marriage. Did Jonathan really understand her? Did he appreciate her sacrifices for his career? Wouldn't Victoria be happier with someone who put her first? At the time, Victoria had appreciated having someone to talk to about her fears and frustrations. Now she realized Bethany had been conducting research, mapping the weak points in Victoria's marriage that she could exploit later. She's been studying us, Victoria said with growing horror. For years, she's been learning our patterns, our problems, our insecurities. This affair isn't spontaneous. It's the final phase of a long-term plan. Grace pulled out her laptop and opened Facebook. Let's see what else we can learn about our dear friend Bethany. They scrolled through years of social media posts, looking for clues about Bethany's true intentions. Most of it seemed normal. Real estate successes, vacation photos, dinner parties with friends. But when Grace sorted the posts by date, a disturbing pattern emerged. "Look at this," Grace said, pointing to a series of posts from college. "Here's one from junior year. Some people think they can take whatever they want from others. Karma is patient, but she always collects her debts. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. What about this one from senior year?" Grace clicked on another post. "The best revenge is making someone believe they have everything they want, then watching it all disappear." Victoria felt cold dread pooling in her stomach. "Keep looking." They found more posts, scattered throughout the years, always cryptic but increasingly pointed. Comments about people who steal others' happiness, references to patience and long-term planning, photos of Victoria and Jonathan at various events with captions that seemed supportive on the surface, but carried undertones of possession and resentment. "Here," Grace said, her voice tight with anger. "From 3 months ago, right when the affair supposedly started, sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who deserve to lose everything. Justice comes for everyone eventually." Victoria stared at the post, remembering that she had liked it at the time, thinking Bethany was referring to some client or workplace drama. Now she realized she had been liking a threat directed at herself. "Grace," Victoria said slowly, "I think Bethany has been planning to destroy my life since college, but I don't understand why. What did I ever do to her?" Grace closed the laptop and turned to face her sister. "Maybe it's not about what you did. Maybe it's about what you have. Some people can't stand to see others happy, especially if they feel like that happiness should belong to them." Victoria's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "Check your email. You need to see this. A concerned friend." Victoria opened her email app with trembling fingers. The message contained a single attachment, a photo taken at a restaurant 3 weeks ago. In the picture, Jonathan and Bethany sat in an intimate booth, his hand covering hers on the table. But what made Victoria's blood freeze wasn't the obvious intimacy between them. It was the expression on Bethany's face as she looked at Jonathan. It wasn't love or desire. It was cold satisfaction, like a hunter who had finally trapped her prey. And in the background of the photo, barely visible but unmistakably there, was a for sale sign for Victoria and Jonathan's house. "She's already listed our house," Victoria whispered. "She's selling our home while Jonathan thinks he's just taking a few days to think." Grace grabbed the phone and stared at the photo. "Victoria, we need to call a lawyer. Tonight. Whatever Bethany is planning, she's moving fast, and you're running out of time to protect yourself." As if summoned by their conversation, Victoria's phone rang. Jonathan's name appeared on the screen. "Don't answer it," Grace warned. "Whatever he says will just be more lies fed to him by Bethany." But Victoria couldn't help herself. She needed to hear her husband's voice, needed to believe there was still some part of him that belonged to her. "Victoria," Jonathan's voice was strained and distant. "We need to talk about the house." "What about the house?" "I'm going to have to sell it. The business is worse than I thought, and we need the equity to cover our debts." Victoria felt the last piece of her old life crumble away. "Our debts? You mean the debts you created by giving our money to your girlfriend?" "She's not my girlfriend. It's complicated." "No, Jonathan, it's very simple. Your mistress has stolen our money, manipulated you into abandoning your pregnant wife, and now she's forcing you to sell our home, and you're letting her do it. You don't understand the financial pressure I'm under. Then come home and explain it to me. We're supposed to be partners. I can't. Not yet. Bethany thinks it's better if we have some space while we sort things out." Victoria hung up on him, her hands shaking with rage. Bethany was still pulling the strings, still controlling every aspect of Jonathan's decisions. And time was running out for Victoria to fight back. "That's it," she said to Grace. "Tomorrow we're hiring the best divorce attorney in the city. If Bethany Morrison wants a war, she's going to get one." Victoria barely slept that night, her mind churning through memories she hadn't revisited in years. As dawn broke through their bedroom windows, she finally understood what she was dealing with and why Bethany Morrison had chosen her as a target. The memory came flooding back as Victoria sat at her kitchen table, staring at old college photos Grace had found in a box in the basement. There it was, captured in faded digital prints, the moment that had set everything in motion 12 years ago. Victoria remembered that spring semester of junior year vividly now. She had been dating casually, focused more on her studies than relationships. Mark Thompson was the kind of guy every girl noticed. Tall, athletic, with an easy smile and the confidence that came from being the captain of the lacrosse team. What Victoria hadn't known was that Bethany Morrison had been in love with Mark since freshman year. Bethany had never mentioned her feelings, had never indicated any interest in Mark beyond casual friendship. She was dating other people, seemed happy and carefree. Victoria had no idea that her quiet, supportive roommate was harboring a desperate, obsessive love for the boy she would soon steal away. The night it all went wrong played out in Victoria's memory like a movie she couldn't stop watching. It was the end of semester party at Mark's fraternity house. Victoria had gone reluctantly, dragged there by friends who insisted she needed to have more fun. She wasn't much of a party person, preferring quiet evenings, studying or watching movies. Mark had approached her near the makeshift bar, offering her a drink and striking up a conversation about her marketing classes. He was charming and attentive, asking thoughtful questions about her goals and dreams. When he asked her to dance, she said yes. What followed was a whirlwind romance that lasted through the summer and into senior year. Mark was everything Victoria thought she wanted. Handsome, popular, ambitious. He made her feel special, chosen, important in a way she had never experienced before. But Bethany had been watching, always watching. Victoria remembered the subtle changes in her roommate's behavior that she had attributed to stress about graduation. Bethany became quieter, more withdrawn. She stopped joining Victoria and Mark for study sessions or casual dinners. She began spending more time away from their shared apartment, claiming she was busy with internship applications and family obligations. The few times Victoria tried to ask if something was wrong, Bethany brushed off her concerns with bright smiles and reassurances that everything was fine. She was just focused on her future, she said, making plans for after graduation. The truth came out at their graduation party, in the most devastating way possible. Victoria had been looking for Bethany in the crowd of celebrating seniors, wanting to share the moment with her closest friend. She found her in the quiet corner of the campus library where they used to study together, sitting alone with a bottle of wine and tears streaming down her face. "Beth, what's wrong?" Victoria had asked, rushing to comfort her friend. "You always get everything I want," Bethany had said, her words slurred with alcohol and pain. "Everything, and you don't even know you're doing it." "What are you talking about?" "Mark." The name came out like a curse. "I loved him for 2 years. Victoria, 2 years. I was building up the courage to tell him how I felt, and then you waltzed in at that stupid party and took him away from me." Victoria had been stunned. "I had no idea you had feelings for Mark. You never said anything." "Would it have mattered if I had?" "Of course it would have mattered. I would never have pursued him if I'd known." Bethany had laughed, a bitter sound that chilled Victoria to the bone. "That's what makes it worse. You didn't even want him at first. You just took him because you could." "That's not true. I care about Mark. For now, but you'll get bored with him eventually. Just like you get bored with everything. You'll move on to the next shiny thing, and Mark will be left wondering what he did wrong. That's what people like you do. You take and take and take, and you never even appreciate what you have." Victoria had tried to explain, to apologize, to find some way to repair the friendship that meant so much to her. But Bethany was beyond reasoning with. "You always get everything I want." "Vic," Bethany had repeated, her eyes cold and calculating even through the tears. "Someday, I'll know how that feels. Someday, you'll understand what it's like to lose everything that matters to you." Victoria had thought it was just drunken rambling, the painful words of a heartbroken friend who needed time to heal. Mark graduated and moved to New York for a job in finance. Victoria followed him there, and they dated for another year before mutually deciding they weren't right for each other. Bethany disappeared from Victoria's life for 6 months after graduation. No calls, no emails, no response to Victoria's attempts to reach out and repair their friendship. Victoria assumed Bethany needed space to process her feelings and move on. When Bethany finally called, it was like nothing had ever happened. She was bubbly and warm, full of apologies for being so dramatic. She had been dealing with family issues, she explained, and hadn't been herself. She missed Victoria terribly and wanted to rebuild their friendship. "Victoria, lonely in a new city and grateful to have her old friend back, had welcomed Bethany with open arms. When Victoria moved back home and met Jonathan 2 years later, Bethany was the first person she called to share the exciting news. Now, sitting in her kitchen 12 years later, Victoria realized the truth. Bethany hadn't forgiven her. She had simply been patient, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike back. Grace found Victoria still staring at the old photos when she arrived that morning with coffee and bagels. "You look terrible," Grace said bluntly. "Did you sleep at all?" "I remember now," Victoria said quietly. "I know why Bethany is doing this." She told Grace about Mark Thompson, about the graduation party, about Bethany's drunken promise of revenge. Grace listened with growing horror. "Jesus, Victoria, she's been planning this for 12 years. She's been waiting for me to have everything she thought she deserved. A husband, a home, financial security, a baby on the way. She waited until I was completely happy and settled, and then she decided to take it all away. That's completely insane. Is it? Think about it from her perspective. She loved Mark first, but I got him. She probably felt like I stole her chance at happiness. So now she's stealing mine." Grace shook her head in disbelief. "But you didn't know about her feelings for Mark. You couldn't steal something you didn't know existed. It doesn't matter. In her mind, I'm the villain who ruins everything she wants. And now she's finally in a position to return the favor." Victoria's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Hayes, this is David Lawson from Lawson and Associates. Your sister called my office yesterday about representation in a divorce matter." Victoria felt relief wash over her. Grace had moved quickly to find her a lawyer. "Yes, Mr. Lawson, I need help. My husband is having an affair, and I think his mistress is stealing our money. I can see you this afternoon if you'd like. But Mrs. Hayes, I should warn you, I received some interesting paperwork this morning that you need to know about." Victoria's stomach dropped. "What kind of paperwork?" "Your husband filed for legal separation yesterday. He's also petitioned the court for emergency financial relief, claiming that you've been hiding assets and making unauthorized withdrawals from joint accounts." Victoria felt the room spinning around her. "That's impossible. I haven't touched our accounts except to check the balances. Mrs. Hayes, I think you need to come in immediately. It appears that someone has been very busy trying to paint you as the villain in this situation, and they're moving much faster than you are." After hanging up, Victoria turned to Grace with panic in her eyes. "They're setting me up. Bethany is making it look like I'm the one who's been stealing money and destroying the marriage. Then we fight back," Grace said firmly. "We gather evidence, we expose her lies, and we make sure everyone knows who the real villain is." Victoria nodded, but deep down she was terrified. Bethany had been planning this for 12 years, systematically positioning herself to destroy Victoria's life. She had access to all of Victoria's vulnerabilities, knew all her secrets, and had Jonathan completely under her spell. How do you fight an enemy who knows you better than you know yourself? How do you win a war when your opponent has been preparing for battle since the day you first met? Victoria touched her still flat stomach, thinking about the baby growing inside her. She might not be able to save her marriage or her financial security, but she was damn well going to protect her child from Bethany Morrison's twisted revenge. The war was just beginning, and Victoria was already behind, but she wasn't giving up without a fight. David Lawson's law office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city. At 48, Lawson had built a reputation as one of the most tenacious divorce attorneys in the state, specializing in cases involving financial fraud and emotional manipulation. Victoria sat across from his mahogany desk, feeling small and overwhelmed as he reviewed the documents that had been filed against her. "This is sophisticated," Lawson said, flipping through pages of legal papers. "Whoever helped your husband prepare this petition knows exactly how to manipulate the family court system. What are they claiming? That you've been emotionally abusive, financially irresponsible, and mentally unstable. They're painting a picture of a woman who's been slowly destroying her marriage through paranoid accusations and reckless spending." Victoria felt sick. "None of that is true. I believe you, but Mrs. Hayes, they have documentation to support their claims. Bank records showing large withdrawals that coincide with what they're calling emotional episodes. Text messages between you and your husband that have been taken out of context to make you sound threatening and irrational. Show me the text messages. Lawson handed her a printout. Victoria read through conversations she remembered having with Jonathan, but they had been edited. Words were missing. Context was removed, and her responses to his messages had been isolated to make her sound angry and unreasonable. They can't use edited text messages in court, Victoria protested. They're not technically edited, they're just incomplete. Your husband could claim he accidentally deleted some of his own messages, or that there were technical issues with his phone. Unless you have complete records of these conversations, it will be difficult to prove manipulation. Victoria realized how carefully Bethany had orchestrated this. She had been encouraging Jonathan to document every fight, every moment of stress, every instance where Victoria seemed less than perfectly stable. Then she had helped him present those moments as evidence of Victoria's mental deterioration. Mr. Lawson, I think my husband's mistress is behind all of this. I think she's been planning to destroy my marriage for years. Lawson leaned back in his chair, studying Victoria's face. That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence? Victoria told him about Bethany's history with her, about Mark Thompson, about the financial manipulation. Lawson listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. Mrs. Hayes, even if everything you're telling me is true, proving it in court will be extremely difficult. Bethany Morrison isn't a party to your divorce. She's just a third party who happens to be involved with your husband. But she's stealing our money. According to these documents, your husband made those investment decisions voluntarily. Ms. Morrison was acting as a licensed real estate agent and financial advisor. Unless you can prove she deliberately gave him bad advice with intent to defraud, her involvement looks legitimate on paper. Victoria felt trapped. So she can destroy my life, and there's nothing I can do about it. I didn't say that. I said proving it in court will be difficult, but there are other ways to gather evidence and expose the truth. Lawson pulled out a business card. I want you to meet with Amanda Stewart. She's a former client of mine who went through something very similar to what you're describing. Victoria took the card, which had only a phone number written on it. Who is Amanda Stewart? Call her. Ask her about Bethany Morrison. I think you'll find the conversation very enlightening. That evening, Victoria sat in her car outside a coffee shop in the suburbs, waiting for Amanda Stewart to arrive. Grace had insisted on coming along for moral support, though she waited in the car while Victoria went inside. Amanda was a woman in her early 40s, attractive but tired-looking, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she was always looking over her shoulder. She recognized Victoria immediately. You look just like your photos, Amanda said, sliding into the booth across from Victoria. Bethany used to show me pictures of you all the time. She was obsessed with your life. You know Bethany? Amanda's laugh was bitter. Know her, she destroyed my entire existence, just like she's doing to you right now. Amanda told her story in a flat, emotionless voice, as if she had recited it so many times that it no longer held any pain for her. 3 years ago, she had been married to a successful contractor named Robert Stewart. They had 2 young children and a comfortable life in the suburbs. Amanda's father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she was spending most of her time caring for him during his final months. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and neglecting her marriage. That's when Bethany appeared, Amanda said. She was our real estate agent, helping us look for a bigger house. She was so understanding about what I was going through with Dad's illness. She offered to help with the kids, to support Robert while I was at the hospital. Victoria felt a chill of recognition. She inserted herself into your crisis. Exactly, and slowly. She convinced Robert that I wasn't the same woman he married, that the stress was changing me, making me difficult and demanding. She was there to listen when he complained about feeling neglected. They had an affair. More than that, she convinced him to invest in a series of construction projects that she claimed would make us wealthy. Robert emptied our savings, took out loans against our house, borrowed money from his business partners. The investments failed. Every single one. It was like Bethany had researched the worst possible deals and steered Robert toward them. Within 6 months, we lost our house, his business, everything. Victoria gripped her coffee cup so tightly her knuckles went white. What happened to your marriage? Robert left me for Bethany during Dad's funeral. Can you believe that he served me with divorce papers at my father's graveside? Said he couldn't handle my emotional instability anymore. And Bethany, Amanda's smile was sharp and cold. She disappeared 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, told Robert she needed space to process their relationship. He never heard from her again. Victoria felt sick. She destroyed your family and then abandoned him. Robert was just a tool to get to me, just like Jonathan is a tool to get to you. Bethany doesn't want your husband, Victoria. She wants your pain. But why? What did you do to her? I dated her college boyfriend for about 3 weeks sophomore year. I had no idea they had ever been together. She never mentioned him. When I found out, I ended things immediately and apologized. I thought she had forgiven me. Victoria stared at Amanda in horror. She destroyed your entire life because you dated someone for 3 weeks. Some people never forget a slight, no matter how small. And some people have a talent for holding grudges until they find the perfect moment for revenge. Amanda reached into her purse and pulled out a thick folder. I've been documenting everything about Bethany Morrison for 3 years. Every lie she told, every manipulation she used, every pattern in her behavior. I've been waiting for her next victim to surface. You knew she would do this again. People like Bethany don't stop. They just find new targets. I've been tracking her movements, watching her social media, waiting for her to strike again. Amanda opened the folder and spread photographs across the table. Pictures of Bethany with different men, in different cities, always looking adoring and supportive. She's done this at least 4 times that I know of. Always the same pattern. She targets married couples during crisis periods, seduces the husband, destroys their finances, and disappears when the damage is complete. Victoria studied the photographs, recognizing Bethany's face but seeing it clearly for the first time. In every picture, Bethany's expression was the same, cold satisfaction masked by false affection. She's not just a woman scorned, Victoria whispered. She's a predator. Exactly, yeah, and Victoria, you need to know, she's not finished with you yet. The affair and the financial destruction are just the beginning. What do you mean? Amanda pointed to one of the photographs, showing Bethany holding a baby. She researched postnatal depression statistics for 6 months before she targeted me. She was planning to use my grief and hormonal instability against me in a custody battle. Victoria's blood turned to ice. She wants my baby. She wants to prove that you're an unfit mother. She's been documenting your stress, your emotional responses, your erratic behavior during this crisis. If she can paint you as mentally unstable, she can help Jonathan get full custody. But why would she want to raise another woman's child? Amanda's smile was grim. Because taking your baby would be the ultimate revenge. She wouldn't keep the child. She'd probably convince Jonathan to give it up for adoption once you're completely out of the picture. She just wants to make sure you lose everything that matters to you. Victoria felt the room spinning around her. Her pregnancy, which should have been a source of joy and hope, had become a weapon that Bethany planned to use against her. What can I do? Victoria whispered. Amanda gathered up the photographs and handed the folder to Victoria. Fight back. Use everything in here to expose what she really is. Don't let her manipulate the narrative anymore. Will you testify about what she did to you? I'll do more than that, Amanda said, her eyes burning with determination. I've been waiting 3 years for the chance to destroy Bethany Morrison. She made the mistake of targeting someone with a sister who won't give up without a fight. As Victoria left the coffee shop, Amanda's final words echoed in her mind. She's not expecting you to fight back. Victoria, that's going to be her downfall. For the first time since this nightmare began, Victoria felt a spark of hope. Bethany Morrison might be a master manipulator, but she had never faced an opponent who had nothing left to lose. Victoria's second trimester began with a burst of energy that Dr. Mitchell assured her was completely normal. What wasn't normal was channeling that energy into building a case against her husband's mistress. But desperate times called for desperate measures. She and Grace had transformed Victoria's dining room into a war room, with Amanda Stewart's research materials spread across the table alongside legal documents, financial records, and a growing timeline of Bethany's manipulations. Look at this pattern, Grace said, pointing to a series of dates on the timeline. Every time Bethany targets a new victim, she spends at least 6 months in research mode. She studies their lives, their weaknesses, their relationships. She doesn't just stumble into these affairs, she engineers them. Victoria studied the documentation Amanda had provided. It painted a chilling picture of a woman who used other people's vulnerabilities as weapons against them. Financial records showed that Bethany made significant income from her failed investment advice. She was receiving kickbacks from the people she was steering her victims toward. She's not just destroying families for emotional revenge, Victoria realized. She's making money from it. That gives us a different angle to pursue, Grace said. Financial fraud is a criminal matter, not just a civil one. Victoria's phone rang, interrupting their planning session. David Lawson's name appeared on the screen. Mrs. Hayes, we have a problem, Lawson said without preamble. Your husband just filed a motion requesting immediate court-ordered psychological evaluation for you. He's claiming that your behavior has become increasingly erratic and potentially dangerous to yourself and your unborn child. Victoria felt the floor drop out from under her. What kind of behavior? According to the motion, you've been making wild accusations about his business partner, conducting surveillance on his workplace, and threatening to harm yourself if he doesn't return home. None of that is true. I know that, but he has documentation. Text messages where you sound desperate and unstable. Witness statements from people who claim to have observed your erratic behavior, and medical records showing elevated stress levels during your pregnancy. Victoria realized how thoroughly she had been set up. Every doctor's visit where she mentioned stress, every frustrated text to Jonathan, every moment of desperation had been twisted into evidence of mental instability. Can they force me to undergo psychological evaluation? If the judge grants the motion, yes. And Mrs. Hayes, if the evaluation suggests any mental health concerns, it could impact your custody rights when the baby is born. After hanging up, Victoria turned to Grace with panic in her eyes. They're trying to prove I'm crazy. Then we prove that you're not, but more importantly, we prove that Bethany is the one who's been driving you to this point deliberately. Grace pulled out her laptop and opened a new document. We're going to document everything, starting from the beginning. Every lie Bethany told, every manipulation she used, every step in her plan to destroy your life. We're going to build a case so airtight that even the most biased judge will see the truth. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your husband is at the Marriott downtown, room 847. If you hurry, you can catch them together. A friend. Grace looked at the message and shook her head. It's a trap. They want you to show up and make a scene, probably while they're recording you. It will be more evidence of your erratic behavior. But what if it's legitimate? What if someone is trying to help me gather evidence? Then they can provide that evidence without requiring you to put yourself in danger. Victoria knew Grace was right, but the temptation to confront Jonathan and Bethany was overwhelming. She wanted to look her husband in the eye and make him see what he was throwing away. She wanted to force Bethany to drop her mask and reveal her true nature. Instead, she called Amanda Stewart. They're trying to have me declared mentally unstable, Victoria told her. Did Bethany try the same thing with you? Of course she did. It's part of her playbook. She pushes you to the breaking point, then uses your natural emotional responses as evidence that you're unfit to be a wife and mother. How did you fight it? I didn't fight it hard enough, Amanda admitted. I was so devastated by everything that had happened that I probably did seem unstable. But you're not me, Victoria. You're stronger, and you have better support. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm losing my mind. That's exactly what she wants you to feel. But Victoria, I've been watching Bethany's social media since we talked, and I think she's getting desperate. What do you mean? She's posting things that suggest the plan isn't going as smoothly as she expected. Comments about stubborn people who don't know when they're beaten, and some battles taking longer than expected. I think your resistance is frustrating her. Victoria felt a flicker of hope. If she's frustrated, maybe she'll make mistakes. Exactly. And when she does, you need to be ready to catch her. That evening, Victoria received an unexpected visitor. Robert Hayes, Jonathan's father, stood on her doorstep looking uncomfortable but determined. Victoria, we need to talk, he said. May I come in? Robert Hayes was a distinguished man in his early 60s, retired from a successful career in commercial real estate. He had always been kind to Victoria, though their relationship was more polite than warm. "I owe you an apology," Robert said once they were seated in the living room. "I should have seen what was happening to Jonathan much sooner." "You know about the affair. I know about more than that, Victoria. I've been doing some investigating of my own, and I'm very concerned about the influence Bethany Morrison has over my son." Robert pulled out a manila folder similar to the one Amanda had shown her. "I started getting suspicious when Jonathan asked me to lend him money for his business. He's never needed financial help before, and when I asked about his existing assets, he couldn't give me straight answers. Pasi, what did you find was financial irregularities that go back almost a year? Investments that make no sense? Contracts that favor other parties? Decisions that no rational businessman would make?" Robert opened the folder and showed Victoria a series of documents. "These are all deals that Bethany advised Jonathan to make. Every single one has cost him money, but they've all benefited the same network of people." Victoria studied the papers, recognizing some of the names from Amanda's research. "She's been stealing from him systematically. Worse than that, she's been setting him up to take the fall for fraudulent activities. If these deals were investigated, Jonathan would appear to be the mastermind behind a complex financial fraud scheme." "You mean she's not just destroying our marriage, she's destroying his life too. I think that was always part of the plan. Jonathan is just a convenient fall guy who serves her purposes now, but he'll be discarded when she's finished with him." Victoria felt a surge of conflicted emotions. She was still angry at Jonathan for his betrayal, but she didn't want to see him destroyed by the same woman who was targeting her. "What can we do? We can work together," Robert said. "I have business connections and financial expertise. You have intimate knowledge of Bethany's psychological patterns. Between us, we might be able to expose her before she completes whatever she's planning." "Won't Jonathan feel like we're ganging up on him?" Robert's expression was grim. "Victoria, I don't think Jonathan is capable of rational thought right now. Whatever hold Bethany has over him, it's stronger than family loyalty or business sense. We may have to save him from himself." As Robert prepared to leave, he turned back to Victoria with a serious expression. "There's something else you need to know. I hired a private investigator to look into Bethany's background. What we found suggests that you and Amanda Stewart aren't her only victims. How many others? At least 6 that we can identify. Possibly more. Victoria, this woman is a serial predator who has been destroying families for over a decade. And based on her pattern of behavior, I don't think she plans to let you walk away from this alive." The words hung in the air like a physical threat. Victoria touched her growing belly, thinking about the innocent life she was carrying. "What do you mean?" "I mean that every one of her previous victims has suffered some kind of accident or health crisis that removed them from the picture permanently. Car crashes, drug overdoses, apparent suicides. The authorities never found evidence of foul play, but the timing was always convenient for Bethany." Victoria felt ice forming in her veins. "You think she's planning to kill me?" "I think she's planning to eliminate you as a threat to her narrative, and a pregnant woman under extreme stress would be a very convenient victim for what appears to be a tragic accident." As Robert's car disappeared down the street, Victoria realized that her fight with Bethany Morrison wasn't just about saving her marriage or protecting her financial future anymore. It was about survival. Victoria's pregnancy reached the 24-week mark just as the psychological evaluation was scheduled to begin. Dr. Patricia Gonzalez, the court-appointed psychologist, was a stern woman in her 50s who specialized in family court cases involving custody disputes. "Mrs. Hayes," Dr. Gonzalez said, settling behind her desk with a thick folder. "I want you to understand that this evaluation is not meant to be adversarial. I'm simply trying to assess your mental state and your fitness as a future parent." Victoria nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. She had spent days preparing for this moment with David Lawson, practicing how to present her story in a way that sounded rational and measured rather than paranoid and desperate. "Tell me about your marriage," Dr. Gonzalez began. Victoria took a deep breath and started from the beginning. The happy early years, the struggles with infertility, the stress of Jonathan's failing business. She mentioned Bethany as a supportive friend who had gradually become more involved in their lives. When did you first suspect your husband was having an affair? When I overheard a phone conversation where he told someone he loved her and couldn't keep pretending with me anymore. How did that make you feel? Devastated, betrayed, confused, but also determined to understand what was happening to my marriage. Dr. Gonzalez made notes throughout the conversation, her expression neutral. Your husband claims that you've been making unfounded accusations against his business partner, Ms. Morrison. Can you tell me about that? This was the crucial moment. Victoria had rehearsed this answer dozens of times. Doctor, I discovered that Ms. Morrison has been involved in similar situations with other couples. I have documentation showing a pattern of behavior where she targets vulnerable marriages, gains financial control through investment advice, and then disappears after destroying the family. Victoria handed over copies of Amanda Stewart's research, organized and presented as professionally as possible. Dr. Gonzalez reviewed the materials with obvious interest. This is quite extensive, the psychologist said. Have you verified this information independently? My father-in-law has hired investigators who confirm much of it. We've also identified at least 6 other victims with similar stories. Dr. Gonzalez spent several minutes reviewing the documentation. When she looked up, her expression had shifted from neutral to concern. Mrs. Hayes, if even half of this is accurate, you're describing a very sophisticated pattern of fraud and emotional manipulation? That's exactly what I'm describing. Doctor, I'm not having paranoid delusions. I'm being targeted by someone who has made a career out of destroying families. The evaluation continued for 2 hours, covering Victoria's childhood, her relationship history, her coping mechanisms for stress, and her plans for motherhood. Dr. Gonzalez was thorough but fair, asking probing questions without seeming hostile. I'll need to interview other people in your life, Dr. Gonzalez said as the session concluded. Your sister, your doctor, perhaps some friends or colleagues. I'll also need to speak with your husband and Ms. Morrison. Of course, doctor. May I ask you something? Certainly. In your experience, when someone is being systematically manipulated by a skilled predator, how does that typically affect their mental state? Dr. Gonzalez considered the question carefully. Victims of sophisticated manipulation often exhibit symptoms that can mimic mental illness, anxiety, depression, paranoid thinking, emotional instability. The key is determining whether these symptoms represent an underlying psychological disorder or a normal response to abnormal circumstances. Victoria felt hopeful for the first time in weeks. Dr. Gonzalez seemed genuinely interested in understanding the situation rather than simply confirming Jonathan's accusations. 2 days later, Victoria was working in her makeshift war room when her phone rang. Grace's name appeared on the screen, and her voice was tight with excitement when Victoria answered. Vic, you need to get down to Dad's old office building right now. I think I found something huge. Grace had been investigating the business connections between Bethany's various investment schemes, using their late father's old contacts in the commercial real estate industry. Their father had been a respected property manager before his death 3 years ago, and Grace still had access to some of his professional networks. Victoria met Grace in the lobby of a downtown office building where their father had once worked. Grace was practically vibrating with excitement. I found the connection, Grace said without preamble. All of Bethany's failed investments trace back to the same shell company, Morrison Holdings LLC. She's been stealing from her victims and funneling the money into her own accounts. They took the elevator to the 7th floor, where Grace had arranged to meet with Tom Morrison, Bethany's ex-husband. Victoria remembered Tom vaguely from Bethany's first wedding, a quiet, nervous man who had seemed overwhelmed by his dynamic wife. Tom looked older than his 40 years, with the hollow eyes of someone who had survived a devastating betrayal. He greeted them in a small conference room overlooking the city. I should have spoken up years ago, Tom said without preamble, but I was afraid no one would believe me. Tell us about Morrison Holdings, Grace said. Tom pulled out a folder thick with financial documents. Bethany set up the company during our marriage, claiming it was for legitimate real estate investments. I thought I was a partner, but I discovered after our divorce that I was just a front man. All the assets were actually controlled by her. How much money are we talking about? Victoria asked. Over the years, probably close to $2 million. Money stolen from the family she destroyed, funneled through fake investment schemes, then moved offshore to accounts I can't track. Victoria felt sick. She's been doing this for years. She's been perfecting her technique, learning what works, what doesn't, how to avoid detection. You're not her first victim, Victoria, but if we don't stop her, you won't be her last either. Tom opened another folder, this one containing photographs and documents that made Victoria's blood run cold. She keeps trophies, Tom said quietly. Pictures of her victims at their lowest points, financial documents showing their ruin, sometimes even personal items she's stolen as souvenirs. The photographs showed devastated families, crying women, men who looked broken and defeated. Victoria recognized Amanda Stewart in one photo, taken outside a bankruptcy court. In another, she saw a woman she didn't recognize, clearly pregnant and sobbing as she signed what appeared to be divorce papers. "That's Sarah Chen," Tom said, pointing to the pregnant woman. "Bethany targeted her 4 years ago. Sarah lost everything, her husband, her house, her business. She gave birth to her daughter while living in a homeless shelter." "What happened to her?" Tom's expression darkened. "Car accident 3 months after the baby was born. Brake failure on a mountain road. Very tragic. Very convenient for Bethany." Victoria touched her own growing belly, terror washing over her. "You think Bethany killed her?" "I think Sarah Chen knew too much about Bethany's operation and was threatening to expose her. I think Bethany couldn't risk letting her live." Grace leaned forward. "Tom, do you have evidence of this? Something we can take to the police?" "I have suspicions and coincidences, but nothing that would hold up in court. Bethany is very careful about leaving evidence. But you kept all this documentation. Why?" Tom's smile was grim. "Because I knew someday she would target the wrong person. Someone who wouldn't just roll over and accept their fate. I've been waiting for someone like you." Victoria. As they prepared to leave, Tom handed Victoria a small recording device. "She always contacts her ex-husbands when she's in the final phase of destroying her current victim," Tom said. "She likes to gloat about her successes. I've been recording our conversations for 3 years, waiting for her to say something incriminating." "Has she called you about me?" "Last week. She's very pleased with how things are progressing. She thinks you'll be completely broken within the next month." Victoria felt a surge of determination. Then she's about to be very disappointed. That evening, Victoria was alone in the house when she felt the first sharp pain in her abdomen. She doubled over, gasping, as another pain followed immediately after. She called Dr. Mitchell's emergency line, her hands shaking as she explained her symptoms. "Get to the hospital immediately." Dr. Mitchell said, "Don't drive yourself. Call an ambulance." As Victoria waited for the paramedics, clutching her belly and praying for her baby's safety, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what Bethany had been waiting for. A medical emergency that would paint Victoria as an unstable, high-risk mother who couldn't handle the stress of pregnancy. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. As the ambulance sirens wailed through the night, carrying Victoria toward an uncertain future, she realized that Bethany Morrison's final gambit had begun. Victoria's hospital room filled with the steady beeping of fetal monitors and the quiet bustle of medical staff who moved with practiced efficiency around her bed. After 6 hours of observation, Dr. Mitchell had determined that the pain was caused by stress-induced contractions, not true premature labor. The baby was stable, but Victoria's blood pressure remained dangerously elevated. "You need to find a way to reduce the stress in your life," Dr. Mitchell said, reviewing Victoria's chart. "I know that's easier said than done given your circumstances, but your body can't sustain this level of tension much longer." Jonathan arrived at the hospital 3 hours after Victoria was admitted, looking disheveled and genuinely frightened. For a moment, seeing him rush through the door, Victoria remembered why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. "Is the baby okay?" he asked, approaching her bed cautiously. "The baby is fine," Victoria said quietly. "The doctors think the contractions were caused by stress." Jonathan's face crumpled with relief and guilt. "Victoria, I'm so sorry. I never wanted any of this to affect your health or the pregnancy. Then come home, end this affair, and let's work on our marriage." "It's not that simple anymore." "Why not?" Jonathan sat down heavily in the visitor's chair, looking older than his 35 years. Because I've made so many mistakes that I don't know how to fix them. The business is failing, our finances are a disaster, and I don't know who to trust anymore. Victoria saw her opening. Jonathan, what if I told you that Bethany has been manipulating both of us, that she's been deliberately sabotaging your business while pretending to help? That's crazy. Bethany's been the only person supporting me through this crisis. Has she been creating the crisis? Before Jonathan could respond, the hospital room door opened, and Bethany Morrison walked in carrying a bouquet of flowers and wearing an expression of perfect concern. "Oh my God, Victoria! I came as soon as I heard," Bethany said, rushing to the bedside. "How are you feeling? Is the baby okay?" Victoria studied Bethany's face, looking for cracks in the mask of friendship. But Bethany's performance was flawless. She seemed genuinely worried and caring. "I'm fine," Victoria said carefully. "The doctors think it was just stress." "Well, of course it was stress," Bethany said, settling into a chair and taking Victoria's hand. "You've been under tremendous pressure. Anyone would be affected." Jonathan watched this interaction with confusion. "Beth, maybe you should go. Victoria needs rest." "Oh, I don't mind staying," Bethany said sweetly. "Victoria and I need to clear the air anyway, don't we?" "Vic," Victoria felt the challenge in Bethany's words. This was the moment of truth, the final confrontation that would determine which version of reality would prevail. "Yes," Victoria said slowly. "I think we do need to talk." Jonathan looked between the two women nervously. "Maybe this isn't the right time. Victoria just had a medical emergency." "Actually," Victoria said, never taking her eyes off Bethany, "this is the perfect time. Bethany, why don't you tell Jonathan about Mark Thompson?" Victoria saw the tiniest flicker cross Bethany's face, the first crack in her perfect composure. "Who's Mark Thompson?" Jonathan asked. "An old college friend," Bethany said smoothly. "I'm not sure why Victoria is bringing him up now." "Tell him about graduation night," Victoria pressed. "About what you said to me in the library." Bethany's smile never wavered, but her eyes turned cold. "Victoria, you're obviously confused. The stress is affecting your memory. Is it, or do you remember telling me that I always get everything you want, and that someday you'll know how that feels?" Jonathan looked completely lost. "What are you two talking about?" Victoria turned to her husband. "Jonathan, Bethany has been planning to destroy our marriage for 12 years, ever since I accidentally dated a boy she was in love with in college." "That's ridiculous," Bethany said, but there was an edge to her voice now. "Victoria, you're having some kind of breakdown." "Am I then explain Amanda Stewart?" Bethany went very still. "I don't know who that is." "Really, because she knows you very well. She knows about the real estate scams, the investment fraud, the way you systematically destroyed her marriage and stole her money." "Victoria," Jonathan said desperately, "what is going on? Who is Amanda Stewart?" Victoria reached for her phone and pulled up the photos Amanda had given her. "She's one of at least 6 women that Bethany has targeted over the years. Look at these pictures. Jonathan, look at the pattern." As Jonathan scrolled through the images, his face grew pale. Victoria watched him recognize the same tactics that had been used on him: the fake investment opportunities, the manufactured financial crises, the gradual isolation from family and friends. "Beth," Jonathan said slowly, "what is this?" "It's lies and manipulation," Bethany said, but her voice was getting sharper. "Victoria has been building some kind of conspiracy theory to explain away her own failures as a wife." "Then explain Morrison Holdings, LLC," Victoria said. Bethany's mask finally slipped completely. The sweet, caring expression disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You've been busy," Bethany said, no longer bothering to hide her true nature. "So have you. For 12 years, apparently." Jonathan stared at Bethany as if seeing her for the first time. "Beth, is any of this true?" Bethany looked at him with something approaching pity. "Oh, Jonathan, you really thought I was in love with you." The words hit Jonathan like a physical blow. "What? You were a tool, darling, a means to an end, a way to hurt Victoria when she was most vulnerable." Victoria felt sick satisfaction at seeing Bethany's true nature finally revealed, even as her heart broke for her husband. "But the affair," Jonathan stammered, The things you said to me were carefully calculated to make you fall in love with me while destroying your marriage. You were so easy to manipulate. Jonathan, so desperate for someone to believe in you when your business was failing. Jonathan's face went white. The business investments you recommended were designed to bankrupt you. Yes, every single one. I made quite a bit of money from the kickbacks. Actually, Victoria watched her husband's world crumble as the truth finally penetrated. Why? He whispered. Because Victoria needed to learn what it feels like to lose everything that matters to her. Her husband, her home, her financial security. Bethany's eyes moved to Victoria's pregnant belly. And soon, her child. What do you mean? Victoria felt ice in her veins. Oh, sweetie, did you really think I was going to let you keep the baby after all the work I've put into proving you're an unfit mother? Victoria realized with horror that Bethany's plan extended far beyond financial ruin. You want to take my child. I want to watch you lose your child. There's a difference. Jonathan will get custody initially, of course, but he'll be so overwhelmed by single parenthood and financial stress that he'll eventually give the baby up for adoption. I'll make sure of it. Jonathan stood up abruptly, his face a mask of revulsion. You're insane. I'm thorough, Bethany corrected. 12 years of planning tends to cover all the details. Bethany, Victoria said quietly, there's something you should know. What's that, dear? Victoria held up her phone, showing that she had been recording the entire conversation. Every word you just said is being live-streamed to my sister, my lawyer, and the police. For the first time, Bethany looked genuinely surprised. Then she began to laugh. Very clever, Victoria, but do you really think a recording from a mentally unstable pregnant woman is going to convince anyone I've spent months building a case that you're having a psychological breakdown? Maybe. But what about the federal agents who've been investigating Morrison Holdings for money laundering? Bethany's laughter stopped abruptly. That's right, Victoria continued. While you were busy tormenting me, the FBI was tracking your financial crimes. Turns out, stealing $2 million from multiple families across state lines gets their attention. The hospital room door opened, and two people in dark suits entered. Bethany Morrison, I'm Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. You're under arrest. Victoria watched with grim satisfaction as Bethany's world finally collapsed around her. The woman who had spent 12 years planning the perfect revenge was led away in handcuffs, her face a mask of rage and disbelief. Jonathan sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. Victoria, I am so sorry. I don't know how to begin to make this right. Victoria looked at her husband, really looked at him, and saw a broken man who had been as much a victim of Bethany's manipulation as she had been. But she also saw someone who had chosen to believe lies about his wife rather than trust the woman who had loved him for 8 years. Jonathan, she said quietly, I need you to understand something. Bethany may have manipulated you, but you chose to believe her lies about me. You chose to abandon me when I was pregnant and vulnerable. That part isn't her fault. It's yours. I know, he whispered. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. Victoria touched her belly, feeling their baby move restlessly inside her. I don't know if that's possible anymore. What do you mean? I mean that some betrayals change you permanently. Some breaks can't be healed, no matter how sorry the person who caused them might be. Jonathan looked up at her with desperate hope. But we're having a baby together. Doesn't that mean something? It means we'll always be connected through our child. But Jonathan, I don't know if I can ever trust you as a husband again. The truth hung between them like a physical presence. Victoria had won the war against Bethany Morrison, but the victory felt hollow. Her marriage was still broken, her trust still shattered, her future still uncertain. But as she felt her baby kick against her hand, Victoria realized something important. She was stronger than she had ever imagined. She had faced down a predator who had destroyed countless other families, and she had won. Whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. 3 days after Bethany's arrest, Victoria was released from the hospital with strict instructions to rest and avoid stress. The irony wasn't lost on her that the collapse of Bethany's scheme had actually triggered the medical emergency it was designed to create. Jonathan had returned to their house, sleeping in the guest room and moving carefully around Victoria like she was made of glass. The space between them felt vast and unbridgeable, filled with words they couldn't take back and trust that might never be rebuilt. "The FBI wants to meet with us tomorrow," Jonathan said over breakfast, not quite meeting Victoria's eyes. "Agent Chen says they need our testimony to build their case against Bethany." Victoria nodded, stirring her tea absently. "David Lawson called this morning. Bethany's trying to claim that everything she did was legitimate business advice, and that we're just bitter clients looking for someone to blame for our own bad decisions." Can she really claim that? She can try, but with Amanda Stewart's testimony and the evidence from her other victims, it's going to be difficult to maintain that defense. Victoria's phone rang, interrupting the awkward conversation. Grace's name appeared on the screen. "Vic, you need to turn on Channel 7 right now," Grace said without preamble. Victoria grabbed the remote and switched to the local news station. A breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Local real estate agent arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme." The news anchor was speaking over file footage of Bethany at various community events. Bethany Morrison, a licensed real estate agent with Morrison Properties, was arrested yesterday on federal charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. According to the FBI, Morrison allegedly targeted vulnerable married couples and systematically defrauded them of their life savings through fake investment schemes. The story cut to an interview with Agent Chen. "This was a sophisticated operation that caused devastating financial and emotional damage to multiple families over more than a decade. We believe there may be additional victims who haven't come forward yet." Victoria felt a mixture of vindication and sadness as she watched Bethany's criminal enterprise finally exposed to the world. All those years of careful planning, of patient manipulation, of calculated revenge, destroyed in a matter of days. "Do you think this is really over?" Jonathan asked quietly. "I think Bethany's part is over," Victoria replied. "But Jonathan, we still have to figure out what happens to us." That afternoon, Victoria met with Dr. Gonzalez to complete her psychological evaluation. The psychologist's demeanor had shifted considerably since their first meeting. "Mrs. Hayes, I want to apologize," Dr. Gonzalez said as they settled in her office. "When I first reviewed your case, I was concerned about possible paranoid ideation. The story you were telling seemed almost too elaborate to be true. And now I understand that you were exhibiting a completely normal stress response to abnormal circumstances. Being systematically manipulated by a skilled predator would cause anyone to seem unstable." Dr. Gonzalez handed Victoria a thick report. "My evaluation concludes that you show no signs of mental illness or psychological unfitness for parenthood. In fact, your ability to recognize and respond to the threat you were facing demonstrates remarkable strength and clarity of thinking." Victoria felt tears of relief welling up in her eyes. "Thank you. Mrs. Hayes, I need to ask you something personal. Do you believe your marriage can be salvaged?" Victoria considered the question carefully. "I don't know. Jonathan was manipulated, but he also chose to believe terrible things about me rather than trust his own wife. I'm not sure how we come back from that. What do you want for your future?" "I want to be the best mother I can be to this baby. I want to rebuild my life on a foundation that can't be shaken by someone else's manipulation. And I want to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to other women." Dr. Gonzalez smiled. "Those sound like the goals of a very healthy, rational person." That evening, Victoria was packing up the war room she and Grace had created in the dining room when she found an envelope that had been slipped under her front door. Her name was written on it in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that made her blood run cold. "Federal prison is temporary. My memory is permanent. This isn't over. B.M." Victoria's hands shook as she called Agent Chen immediately. "Mrs. Hayes, I need you to stay calm," Agent Chen said after Victoria read the message aloud. "Bethany Morrison is being held without bail. There's no way she could have delivered that note personally. Then she has an accomplice. Possibly, or someone is playing a cruel prank. Either way, we're taking this seriously. I'm sending agents to your house right now." Within an hour, Victoria's living room was filled with FBI agents, local police officers, and crime scene technicians. They dusted for fingerprints, analyzed the paper and ink, and interviewed neighbors about any suspicious activity. "The handwriting isn't Bethany's," Agent Chen confirmed, But that doesn't mean the threat isn't real. What kind of security can you provide? Victoria asked. We can increase patrols in your neighborhood and install a panic button system in your house. But Mrs. Hayes, you need to understand that we can't provide around-the-clock protection indefinitely. Victoria touched her belly, thinking about the innocent life she was carrying. What do you recommend? Consider relocating temporarily. Maybe stay with family in another city until we can determine if this threat is credible. That night, Victoria lay awake in her bed, listening to every sound the old house made. Jonathan was in the guest room down the hall, and she could hear him moving around restlessly. Around 2 in the morning, she heard footsteps on the gravel driveway outside. Victoria grabbed her phone and peered through the bedroom curtains. A figure in dark clothing was standing near Jonathan's car, apparently doing something to the vehicle. Victoria hit the panic button Agent Chen had installed and called 911. Within minutes, police cars surrounded the house, their lights flashing red and blue against the darkness. But when the officers searched the property, they found nothing. No intruder, no signs of tampering with the car, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. Maybe I imagined it, Victoria told the officers, feeling foolish and paranoid. Or maybe whoever was here heard the sirens and ran. The lead officer replied, either way, we're not taking any chances. The next morning, Jonathan announced that he was moving out of the house completely. It's not safe for you here, he said, packing his clothes into suitcases. And my presence is just making things more complicated. Where will you go? Back to Dad's house for now. Victoria, I know you don't want to hear this, but I think you should consider his offer to stay at the family cabin until after the baby's born. Robert Hayes had indeed offered Victoria the use of his remote mountain cabin, a secluded retreat 3 hours north of the city. Victoria had been reluctant to leave her home, but last night's incident had shaken her confidence. What about our marriage? Victoria asked. Are we just giving up? Jonathan stopped packing and looked at her with anguish in his eyes. I don't know how to fight for something I've already destroyed. Victoria, I betrayed you in the worst possible way. I chose to believe lies about you rather than trust the woman I promised to love and protect. How do you forgive something like that? I don't know if I can, Victoria admitted. But Jonathan, we're going to be parents in 4 months. Don't we owe it to our child to try? Maybe what we owe our child is 2 parents who are healthy and stable, even if they're not together. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow, but she recognized the truth in them. Their marriage had been broken long before Bethany Morrison appeared to deliver the final blow. So this is it, Victoria asked. We're giving up. I'm giving you space to heal without having to look at the person who hurt you every day. Maybe someday, when you've had time to process everything that's happened, we can try to rebuild something. But right now, I think I'm just making everything worse. Victoria watched her husband pack the last of his belongings and felt the final threads of their marriage snapping one by one. Bethany Morrison had won after all, not through her elaborate schemes, but through the simple truth that some betrayals were too deep to survive. But as Victoria felt her baby move inside her, she realized that this ending might also be a beginning. For the first time in years, she would be completely free to make her own choices, to build her own future, to become the person she was meant to be. Bethany had tried to destroy her, but instead, she had set Victoria free. 6 months later, Victoria sat in the federal courthouse, holding her 3-month-old daughter Emma against her chest as the judge delivered Bethany Morrison's sentence. The courtroom was packed with victims and their families, all waiting to see justice finally served. Bethany Morrison, Judge Patricia Walsh said, her voice carrying the weight of authority, you have been found guilty on 14 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Your crimes span more than a decade and have caused immeasurable financial and emotional damage to numerous families. Victoria looked across the courtroom at Bethany, who sat rigidly at the defendant's table. Even now, facing 25 years in federal prison, Bethany maintained her composed exterior. But Victoria could see the rage burning in her eyes, the fury of a predator who had finally been caught. The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Judge Walsh continued, you are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $2.4 million to your victims. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the courtroom. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face, not just for herself, but for Amanda Stewart, Tom Morrison, and all the other families that Bethany had destroyed. As the court officers led Bethany away, she turned back to look directly at Victoria. Her lips moved silently, but Victoria could read the words, "This isn't over." Victoria held Emma closer and whispered back, "Yes, it is." After the sentencing, Victoria gathered with the other victims and their families outside the courthouse. Amanda Stewart approached her with tears in her eyes. "We did it," Amanda said, embracing Victoria carefully around the baby. "We actually stopped her." "You stopped her," Victoria corrected. "If you hadn't kept all that documentation, if you hadn't been brave enough to come forward, she would still be out there destroying families." "What's next for you?" Amanda asked. Victoria looked down at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully despite the chaos around them. "I'm starting my own business, a consulting firm that helps women rebuild their lives after financial abuse." The idea had come to Victoria during the long months at Robert's mountain cabin, where she had given birth to Emma and slowly pieced her life back together. She realized that her experience with Bethany, horrible as it had been, had given her unique insights into how predators operated and how victims could protect themselves. "I want to make sure other women recognize the warning signs before it's too late," Victoria continued. "And I want to help them rebuild when the worst happens." Jonathan appeared at Victoria's side, looking nervous but determined. Their relationship had evolved into something neither marriage nor divorce, a careful co-parenting arrangement built on shared love for their daughter and mutual respect for what they had survived together. "The settlement money came through," Jonathan said quietly. "Your portion is already in your business account." The FBI had recovered most of the money Bethany had stolen over the years, and the victims were slowly being compensated. Victoria's share would be enough to start her consulting business and provide financial security for Emma's future. "Thank you," Victoria said, "for everything you've done to make this right." Jonathan had spent the months since Bethany's arrest working tirelessly to rebuild his business and repair the financial damage she had caused. He had also undergone therapy to understand how he had been so thoroughly manipulated and to address the underlying issues that had made him vulnerable to Bethany's influence. "Victoria," Jonathan said, "I know we've talked about this before, but I need to say it one more time. I'm sorry, not just for the affair, but for not trusting you when you tried to warn me, for choosing to believe her lies instead of believing in you." Victoria studied her ex-husband's face, seeing genuine remorse and growth in his expression. "I know you are. And Jonathan, I've forgiven you, not for your sake, but for mine and Emma's. Carrying that anger was only hurting me." "Does that mean," Jonathan started to ask, then stopped himself. "Does that mean we might get back together someday?" Victoria finished gently. "I don't know. We're different people now than we were before all this happened. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not. But either way, we're Emma's parents, and that makes us family forever." Jonathan nodded, accepting the boundaries Victoria had established. Their relationship might never be romantic again, but it had evolved into something deeper than romance, a partnership built on shared trauma, mutual respect, and unconditional love for their child. 3 months later, Victoria stood in her new office, looking out at the city where her life had almost been destroyed. The sign on her door read, "Phoenix Consulting, helping women rise from financial abuse." Her first major client was Sarah Chen, a tech executive whose husband had been systematically stealing from her company while conducting an affair with his secretary. Sarah's story was different from Victoria's, but the underlying patterns of manipulation and financial abuse were eerily similar. "I feel so stupid," Sarah said during their first meeting. "I should have seen the signs earlier." "You trusted someone you loved," Victoria replied. "That's not stupid. That's human. The people who abuse that trust are the ones who should feel ashamed." Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Saw the article about your business in the paper? Mom would be so proud of you." Victoria smiled, thinking about her mother and how she would have handled this situation. Her mother had always been a fierce advocate for women's rights and financial independence. She would have loved seeing Victoria turn her worst experience into a force for good. Emma was napping in her carrier beside Victoria's desk, her tiny fist curled around a small stuffed rabbit that Jonathan had brought her. Victoria watched her daughter sleep and marveled at how something so beautiful and pure could come from such a dark period in her life. Her laptop chimed with an email notification. The subject line made her heart skip a beat. Thank you from a survivor. The email was from a woman named Lisa Rodriguez in Phoenix, Arizona. She had read about Victoria's story in a magazine article and wanted to share her own experience with a financial predator who had nearly destroyed her family. Your story gave me the courage to report what happened to my family, Lisa wrote. The woman who targeted us was arrested last week on fraud charges. Thank you for showing me that victims can fight back and win. Victoria realized that her story was rippling outward, inspiring other victims to come forward and seek justice. What Bethany had intended as the ultimate revenge had instead become a catalyst for positive change. As the sun set over the city, Victoria began planning her next steps. She wanted to write a book about recognizing and surviving financial predators. She wanted to speak at conferences and workshops, educating women about protecting themselves and their families. She wanted to build a network of survivors who could support each other through recovery and rebuilding. Emma stirred in her carrier, opening her bright blue eyes and looking up at her mother with the trusting gaze of an innocent child who had never known betrayal or manipulation. We're going to be okay, baby girl, Victoria whispered, lifting Emma into her arms. More than okay. We're going to be extraordinary. Outside her office window, the city lights sparkled like stars, full of possibility and promise. Victoria had been broken and rebuilt, betrayed and vindicated, destroyed and reborn. Bethany Morrison had tried to teach her what it felt like to lose everything that mattered. Instead, she had taught Victoria something much more valuable, that she was stronger than she ever imagined, more resilient than she knew, and capable of transforming her worst experiences into her greatest strengths. The perfect storm that had threatened to destroy Victoria's life had instead cleared the way for something better than she had ever dreamed possible. She was no longer the woman who could be manipulated by a skilled predator. She was Victoria Hayes, survivor, mother, entrepreneur, and warrior. And her story was just beginning. Epilogue 2 years later. Victoria received a letter forwarded from the federal prison where Bethany Morrison was serving her sentence. The envelope was marked "Return to Sender." Bethany had refused to accept delivery. Inside was a simple message, "You won." Victoria smiled and handed the letter to Emma, who was now a toddler with her father's curious eyes and her mother's determined spirit. "What's that, Mama?" Emma asked in her halting toddler vocabulary. "That," Victoria said, "is a letter from someone who tried to hurt us but made us stronger instead." Emma crumpled the paper in her tiny fist and threw it in the trash, then clapped her hands with delight. Victoria laughed, realizing that her daughter had just demonstrated the perfect response to Bethany Morrison's final attempt at intimidation. Some battles are won not through elaborate strategies or careful planning, but through the simple act of refusing to be destroyed. Victoria had learned that lesson the hard way, and she would spend the rest of her life teaching it to others. The war was over, and love had won. If this story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate triumph kept you on the edge of your seat, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was working against you? How did you handle it? Your experiences could help other listeners who might be facing similar situations. If you enjoyed Victoria's journey from victim to victor, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps other people discover these stories. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because I share new stories of resilience, revenge, and redemption every week. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that no matter how dark things get, it's possible to fight back and win. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed. Until next time, remember, you're stronger than you know, and your story isn't over yet. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.